It has been known by many names, but I know it as Stalingrad, City of Blood.
Gorod Krovi is the fourth and final Primus character map, and oh boy, does it mark a shift in tone. Whereas Zetsubo was bleak, somber, and dull, Gorod Krovi marks a return to the old days of COD zombies with vodka, over-the-top gameplay, and dragons? Played it simple, Gorod Krovi is the Black Ops 1 Zombies map of Black Ops 3. In fact, Gorod's roots actually go back even further, seeing tons of inspiration drawn on from Derice. It's bold and is still to this day the last original Ether Zombies map. Gorod Krovi is a great map for sure, but despite all this, I've always personally felt that it's not quite as good as some make it out to be. While amazing, I've come to believe that it isn't quite an equal with the likes of Jason Blundell at best. And so today we'll be skydiving into the map, doing a full analysis, and seeing just where it lines up in the great scheme of Treyarch's catalog so far. Gorod Krovi makes a huge first impression, with the opening shot of the cutscene being our main four characters flying out of a portal to the theme of Motorhead. Ace of Spades blares in the background as they try to secure Peter McCain's parachute and land safely. We get to see our original Nikolai in a giant mech suit destroying zombies. They even cut the background audio to make it sound like Nikolai is listening to that song as he fights. There's amazing shots of dragons, and more so than anything, I think the tone is just set. The Gorod intro tells us that this map is returning to the old school days of zombies. It's going to be over the top and almost caricature-esque. Intro cutscene is one of the greatest of all times and probably fires me up more than any cutscene ever. And even if you don't agree with me on that, at the very least, for the first time since Shadows, we're given a great introduction piece. And so overall, I just think it does a really good job of getting players excited to go into and explore the map. Now, despite that crazy intro, I wouldn't say that Gorod is quite as over the top as it initially makes you feel. It lets you know that these moments are there. But I wouldn't go so far as to say that Gorod completely returns to the themes and motives of, say, Kino der Toten. Gorod still has some serious tones which are experienced mainly through the soundtrack and storyline. But still, it does both. With wild shouts from Ultimus Nikolai about vodka in the opening rounds, there is definitely a return to old times here. So I think ultimately Gorod tells you that it's going to have a little bit of both. At times, it's going to be the most over-the-top that Black Ops 3 will get, but it's still dynamic enough that it can throw some seriousness in when it needs to. Most importantly, I think the over-top brashness of the intro goes to introduce you to a return to old gameplay. Gorod Krovi sits as the most Black Ops 1-like, non-Black Ops 1 map, and so I think this is what we should look at first. So while Der Eisendrache often gets most of the praise for being the simple, beginner-friendly map, I think Gorod really goes unnoticed in this area. DE has a simple power, pack-a-punch, and initial wonder weapon, but it gets pretty complex from there. And I think Gorod, despite actually being really hard and having a complicated Easter egg, is more of a straightforward map on the gameplay side. So let's dive deeper, shall we? So Gorod Krovi is basically complicated Derice. I know that might sound weird to you, but it will make sense. Weighing it at a modest 23 Nocturne Totens, Gorod Krovi is actually the smallest Black Ops 3 map. And so the map basically has three wings or branches. There's the middle and main dragon command area with Sophia and the Easter egg screens. To the right, there is the library-like looking supply area, and to the left, we have the industrial tank factory. Now, looking back to Derice, do you notice how the map has a similar structure? There's the middle wing, which is the catwalk area, complete with teleporter and quick revive, and then there are the other two side branches, also with teleporters. Three wings which branch off of a central main area that is connected to spawn. Gorod Krovi might be bigger and a little bit more complex, but it essentially has the exact same layout. Overall, I feel like Gorod Krovi is laid out decently, but not the greatest. Tank and supply are connected rather awkwardly to the rest of the map, and it's hard to get from them to spawn. Overall, the map is laid out pretty well, but I've always wished that there was a direct route from those two side wings to spawn. Now things get even more interesting when we look at Pack-a-Punch, however. Darius and GK also share the same Pack-a-Punch structure. So on Darius you must go to one of the wings, activate a timer, and return to spawn to link the pad. Gorod Krovi has a slightly different end goal, but it plays very similarly. You insert a command rod into a machine at the wing area, which is the equivalent of going to the teleporter on Darius. Instead of then heading to spawn, however, you must defend a Groth module at a random location. So do you see the similarities? Each have 3 total phases, each require you to head to all of the wings of the map, from which fast movement to another location is then required. The last similarity is most striking, however. On both maps, those 3 wings then serve as a fast travel to Pack-a-Punch. On Darius, one can use a teleporter to quickly get there, which very closely mirrors the Dragon Ride, which, by the way, may I add, is a very cool cutscene, is one of the many ways Gorod is over the top. Now moving to Gorod's inspiration from Black Ops 1, I think the biggest thing is its placement of the Wonder Weapon in the box. Box Wonder Weapons is one of the most defining features of Black Ops 1, and I think people were excited for this to return. While I personally prefer the buildable Wonder Weapon, I think it was a smart choice for this map. For new maps, we hadn't seen a box Wonder Weapon since Buried, and so BO3 was in need of a map with this simple design. Now as far as the Mark III goes, it's basically an overpowered weapon that makes you incapable of dying until it's not. The Mark III is ridiculous, but only for the first 40 rounds. And while a lot of people have their criticism with this, that it's not good enough, I actually think that it makes sense. The purpose of the Mark III is to be really good for everything except high rounds. Up until about round 40, its black hole makes it so you can hardly die while camping, so it's OP in that category. What does make it balanced though is that it has this fall off. You can't rely on camping with this thing through to round 100, and so that actually makes it pretty fair, especially because Gorod is the hardest Black Ops 3 map. On the other hand though, it does certainly serve as a huge crutch weapon for early rounds and Easter eggs, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I would say at the very least, it's not a free round 70 plus like the Ice Staff, Stormbow, Sliquifier, or upgraded Apothecan's Servant. Now Gorod Krovi also steps it up with all sorts of new items and features. The Guard of Fafnir is the first huge improvement over the original shield. The Rocket Shield of Shadows had been an interesting upgrade, but it did prove to be very practical, whereas Gorod Shield shoots fireballs, making it both super helpful and incredibly true to the theme of the map. We also see the Dragon Strike, which is acquired from completing the 4 lockdown stages in the Pack-a-Punch house. It basically serves as a targeted artillery strike that attracts all the zombies to your area that you lay it down on, essentially making it a once per round monkey bomb. But on top of that, it's cool. It actually gets a dragon to come over the map and breathe fire on the area you're targeting. And even more so, it can be upgraded with some relatively simple steps to become that much stronger. Oh, I should also mention that the shield can be upgraded as well. Now, Gorod also brought in some new weapons. We see the L4 Siege, a powerful explosive weapon, the NX Shadowclaw, which when Pack-a-Punched can revive downed allies, the FFAR, a beastly upgraded variant of the FAMAS, and most iconic of all, the return of my sweet, sweet PPSH. And so like Zetsubo, Gorod does a nice job of adding in weapons that actually incentivize you to hit the box. It was a major problem on DE, but especially with the Mark III being in there is ample reason to actually go for the box on this map. And actually considering how important the Mark III is to the Easter egg, perhaps even too much. Now GK also has 2 new enemies. The Russian Mangler is your classic mid-round boss. Relatively on the weaker side of these bosses, these guys spawn quite a bit more often to make up for their lack of power. While I can't say they're anything amazing, they fit the map pretty well. Valkyrie drones are the second more interesting addition, and I can't say their presence is all that well regarded. I think these enemies are mostly disliked because of their erratic behavior. Valkyries are pretty annoying and mostly just end up delaying rounds or getting in your way. Furthermore, I can't really say that they feel appropriate to the map. I just see no connection as to how they tie into Stalingrad or dragons. Now, even more interesting, however, is Gorod also has equipable items for the first time ever. Dragon wings reduce explosive and fire damage. There's the hat, which reduces damage taken and increases damage delivered to Valkyrie drones. And lastly, the Mangler helmet does the same thing to its respective enemy. Overall, they're an amazing set of new items, and probably the most original addition to the map. It's also worth noting that Gorod Krovi added time trials. These basically existed to challenge you to race to rounds in intervals of 5 for special melee rewards. Achieving any of these rounds in a certain amount of time would give you very cool weapons from multiplayer. And while I can't say that the melee weapons themselves were overly useful, the challenge themselves provided a really fun and new way to play zombies. Looking forward in the Black Ops Cold War, I really hope that we get a more structured version of this. And so with all this in mind, Gorod sits as a really strong gameplay-based map. It can be played as a camping or training map and is good for both beginner games or more advanced high-round stuff. Gorod just has so many different ways to play, and so in terms of gameplay, I think it's always stood slightly above DE. There's just something about training and camping strategies that feels very reminiscent here of the old days. There's enough here so that it feels fresh, but again, I would argue that a lot of this map is based on the philosophy behind Black Ops 1. That is, of course, unless you want to take a crack at the Easter egg, which we're now going to. The Gorod Krovi Easter egg is not like anything we had ever seen. This is because the Easter egg is most focused on gameplay, and so it provides a much different experience to anything we had ever seen. The Easter egg technically starts with the turning on of power. From here, players are able to do the Graph modules and access Pack-a-Punch. And so then the next step is the lockdown, where you go through 3 waves of defending the area from enemies, and then a final wave where enemies come from all 3 areas. Overall, it's pretty engaging, but I do find it to be quite drawn out. It takes almost exactly 5 minutes, which I think is just a touch too long for an opening step. You're just getting going into the flow of things, and the lockdown feels like it halts your progression. I think it might have been better if they only had 2 first stages and then the final. This would shorten it to 3.5 minutes while still bearing the weight of the step. Now, from here we get to the most drawn out section of the egg. The egg. Acquiring the Gauntlet of Siegfried is a tedious process. So first you pick up the egg at the infirmary and head back to the main map. From here you need to place it at a nest and wait for a dragon to come breathe fire on it. This itself can take forever depending on how long it takes for the dragon to come. From here though, it gets even worse, as now you have to go through 1 full round for the egg to cool. You then have to go through 3 trials: collateral, melee, and flaming zombie kills. Flaming kills are first, so this means that you must instantly then wait for another dragon, and then from there you can finish the easier penetration and melee kill step. Now lastly, once this is completed, you must then take it back to the infirmary, do another quick lockdown step to wait yet another full round before you can get the gauntlet. Honestly, this process is longer and more drawn out than any single thing in Zetsubo. At the very least, you're spending 5 rounds on the egg, but that can easily turn into 6 or 7 if you make any mistakes. The only real redeeming feature of this process is the fact that the gauntlet is amazing. A beastly power fist combined with a baby dragon that fights and collects things for you is a fantastic specialist ability. And I think really the reason people don't complain near as much as they should with this step is because the reward makes it worth it. Now from here, it's on to the first real official step of the egg. This is turning on the generator downstairs of Pack-a-Punch in the infirmary to begin the valve step. From the perspective prior to this egg being beaten, back in the Z-House days, I would actually say that the valve step was hands down the best puzzle ever put into zombies. So, the perfect Easter egg puzzle is one that is near impossible to initially solve, but once understood can be done by anyone. The valve step is the perfect example of this. This was a great step because it completely stumped the community, thereby prolonging the length of the Easter egg hunt. Nobody knew how it actually worked, and so it was really just guesswork. Eventually, however, after the egg had been beaten, someone devised a formula that solves the puzzle for you, and they realized that it's actually a pretty simple algorithm once you understand the way the valves are connected. And this is the beauty of the valve step. Ridiculously challenging to begin with, but now it's incredibly easy, assuming that you know the website to go to. I think the fact that you need to go to Milo's website just to beat this is, yeah, maybe a little bit much, but considering what the step did for the egg hunt and how easy it is to actually do, I think it works out pretty nicely. Now, from here, players must finish trophy collection. A very weird step in this egg, there are 6 seemingly arbitrary trophies located around the map. While their collection is altogether quite easy, it's another step that I believe deserves criticism, mainly because it doesn't really serve a purpose. Like, you need trophies so that Sophia can show you what to do on the next set of steps? Sure, it adds an element of collectathon to the map, but I don't know if it's what Gorod Krovi really needed. And at the very least, I've never heard anyone say, I sure do love the trophy collection step. Anyway though, from here we're finally to the meat and potatoes of this egg. Sophia's Trial of 6. This is probably the most polarizing step of the egg, so let's go through each one before I give my final opinion. Although random, one of the first 5 possible steps you can get is the Russian Mangler step. This step can be annoying as it can be hard to actually find him. I've failed this step many times simply because I went to the wrong area of the map, and by the time I got to the other side, it was too late and the step was over. But assuming you do find him, this step is super easy. All you have to do is shoot his arm and he starts running towards you. While a tiny error like Electric Cherry's reload can make you fail, I think it's a pretty easy step once you know what you're doing. Now, next up we have the Valkyrie drone. This is the first of Sophia's 6 that leans heavily on the Mark III. With that gun, all you have to do is spam the left attack that creates the ball to slow down zombies, and it's just dead easy. However, if you don't have the Mark III, this is a genuinely awful step. It is so hard as you need to round up the zombies and slowly move the drone while making sure not to damage him. While easier as a team in any form, this is a rough step. Again, unless you have the Mark III. Now, next up we have the bomb step. One of the most despised steps in this egg, the bomb step is unforgiving. If you press the wrong bomb, every player next to one instantly downs. In reality, however, there is a super easy workaround. Just don't stand in the room if it's not your bomb's turn. So while unforgiving, it's not that bad, especially since you can pause to write it down in solo. I like the unforgiving nature of the step, and I like the pressure it creates. What I hate about it, however, is that in solo, you usually have to run around the entire map twice. That's it. I'm literally just lazy. And like with the ease with step, I hate running around the map. Especially because, again, Gorod does have a bit of an awkward layout. Now, next up we have Gersh. First of all, I should mention that I absolutely love the bit of storyline we get here, especially with how Gersh even recognizes you from Ascension. As for the step itself, again, this leans entirely on the Mark III. If you have it, you can do so much damage to him so fast that he doesn't even move once you find him. This destroys the entire purpose of the step. And then, as you probably guessed it, if you don't have a Mark III, this step becomes very challenging. It's certainly doable, but solo players will have their work cut out for them if they get unlucky with the box. Now, second lastly, we have the Graph module step. This is by far the best of the first 5. Gameplay orientated, this step creates an immersive challenge with a rewarding goal. Really, I feel like the purpose of these modes are meant to be mini games, and this is the only one that actually really feels like that. It's especially cool because you actually have to use your baby dragon to go get the piece from it. And while the Mark III again makes it dead easy, doing it with or without a team is overall still a really good time. And always last, we have the lockdown. Now, this should be a fantastic step. It should serve as the climax of the egg's second act, mirroring the first time you visited the Pack-a-Punch and got your Dragon Strike. Except now with a beefed up kit, it can send more at you to make for a super intense time. Sadly, however, it's not. The game does not throw all that much at you, and even if they did, there is a massive exploit. The stage won't progress until you defeat all Manglers, and so if you leave just one alive, you can run around the main floor until the download process is over. It's a great idea for a step, but it's just annoying that it can be ruined with this simple exploit. And so after this, you will have finished Sophia's 6. So as a whole, Sophia's Trial of 6 is either extremely easy or infuriatingly difficult. There's really no in between. More so, the fact that when you fail, you must then finish a full round to try again only makes this worse. This kills all flow of the egg, and when something as simple as an electric cherry burst can ruin the Valkyrie or Mangler step, I think the consequences are too high here. Beginner players can find themselves in deep water quick, only halfway through these at round 20. Like in comparison, the flag step on Shadows can be attempted infinitely, with ammo being the main restrictor. I just don't see why Gorod could have had the exact same thing. Still, however, this entire problem is solved with Mega Gobblegums or a Ray Gun Mark III. Whether that's a good thing, I don't really think so. Now, from here, you basically are on to the boss fight, which I am incredibly split on. Let's look at the positive side first. Gorod's boss fight was the best spectacle we'd ever seen in zombies. Dragons, giant mech suits, what is not to love? As a concept, it's cool, and in the DE Retro, I even said it was the best. But I should clarify what my intention behind that statement was. What I meant was that Gorod has the coolest boss fight, but it's not the best. And that's because...
We are not the enemy, Nikolai. You will have to strike harder than that!
So, the GK boss fight is always brought up as a point to why it's the best Black Ops 3 map. But the fact that it's really easy is alone enough to make it overall second best in DE. The dragon fight, while again cool, is itself ridiculously easy with a ray gun Mark III. You simply need to sit in a corner and spam the weapon until the dragon becomes vulnerable. From here, it's simply a few shots per sequence and then you're done. Compared to a keeper sequence, which even itself can be easy, the dragon doesn't even have waves of juiced up panzers or anything in the like, so it just feels inconsequential. There is nothing that should be able to kill you here. And then, after the dragon fight, you have...
Enemy, Nikolai. You will have to strike harder than that!
I think the fact that a normal gobblegum can make this a 10-second fight is enough to, again, really diminish the overall greatness of this fight. Despite it being an amazing spectacle, the gameplay itself is just super disappointing. And I think it's the boss fight that actually has aged the worst on this map. Unlike Zet, Gorod has gotten worse with time. And so with all that in mind, we're left with the storyline to pick up on the slack on an otherwise imperfect egg. And to be honest, I think it actually does a pretty good job of that. GK does three major things for the storyline. First, it ties up some loose ends by explaining some of the side characters. We got Peter McCain, we got Gersh's fate along with Sophia, which actually is important because she plays a huge role in the next map. Next, Gorod finishes the 4-character quest arc. Our Primus crew get the 4th and final soul, setting up the stage for our finale map. And most importantly of all, well, at least coolest, we finally get introduced to Dr. Monty. And while he doesn't play a huge role here, I think his introduction is perfect. He's aggressive and meta despite still remaining extremely ominous. Good, because it is. While I don't really want to talk about his big revelation in BO4, in BO3 he is an instantly likable character. His monologue after the fight does a great job to set the stage for BO3's finale as well.
I'm Dr. Monty. Hello. So nice to see you all.
Now let's also make sure to talk about the ending cutscene. Probably my second favorite of BO3, Gorod ends with a very sad and moving piece. We learn that the main reason for Nikolai's alcoholism is due to their wife being killed in the fallout of the war. This is a very powerful moment, as in a single stroke it makes the most stereotypical character of the Ultimus 4 instantly dynamic. No longer is he just the funny drunk Russian guy, but now all of a sudden it's sad, truly depressing. It also does the best job of representing the polarity between the two characters. You can almost apply it to yourself. Ultimate Nikolai is the worst version of you, the version of yourself that you would become if you gave in to all of your worst tendencies and tried to avoid truth. Primus Nikolai serves as an amazing foil to that personality as the best version of you. He symbolizes who we could become if we are to do our best and aim for a higher purpose. So it's sad, symbolic, and it represents the end of this giant 4-person quest. So, in conclusion, I think this is a map that hasn't aged as well as some may think. That isn't to say it's bad, however. People often relate the word underrated to bad, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Underrated simply means that it's not as good as the masses' general consensus, and I believe that's exactly where GK falls. It's a fantastic map, but it's just not as perfect as people claim. Overall, I believe Gorod Krovi is played best as a map purely for the gameplay. It draws on a BO1 formula with a Duris layout and modern Black Ops 3 features to make a truly amazing experience. It's also got great storyline and character development with overall amazing visuals and a grand sense of atmosphere. It's in Stalingrad, my god. Really, my only reason I say the map is overrated is because I find the Easter egg and boss fight to be just not that great. It's trying to be a hard egg, but so many steps can be exploited with the Mark III, and so though a lot of these steps ultimately land as tedious. Still, however, the underlying ideas of Sophia's 6 trials is really neat, and the boss fight is a grand spectacle. It's just unfortunate that with age, GK's egg has become entirely exploitable. And so, all in all, I really like this map. It's a true classic, and despite my criticism, is still good enough to make it into our top 5. With all that said, my final rating for Gorod Krovi is a 9.4 out of 10. S tier.